You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS fluff or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 58, From Victim to Victor, Methods to Manipulate Your Time to Work for You. If you are an entrepreneur who wants to take consistent, massive, focused action in your business and life, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. I'm excited about this episode because you're going to meet our guest, Jeff Sanders. Jeff is a keynote speaker, author of the Free Time Formula, the 5 a.m. Miracle, and founder of the Rockin' Productivity Academy. Jeff is also the host of the 5 a.m. Miracle podcast, which has ranked number 1 in iTunes in the self-help and business categories, been nominated for 5 podcast awards, and exceeded 5 million downloads. Every week, you can find Jeff writing and speaking at jeffsanders.com. When listening in on my conversation with Jeff, you will discover how to go from victim to victor of your time, why you have way more free time than you think, how to be busy by choice instead of letting busyness define your life, the importance of having margin in your calendar, and so much more. So let's dive right in and meet Jeff. Hello, Jeff, and welcome to Productivity Straight Talk. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Amber. Good to be here today.
I am so excited about having you. So I got to let our listeners in on a little secret. I have a kind of like, I'll call it a black book list of people that I wanted on my show. And you have been on it for quite some time because I've been following your work and I thought you'd bring so much value to the podcast. And then I saw you had a book coming out and I thought, okay, the time is now. So I just sent you a message and you were so generous to say yes and come here and talk to us about your new book and about productivity and all things about being our best self. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's exciting to be in someone's little black book. I always love to hear that kind of thing.
Right? You never know where you're at. And the timing just lined up so well that you have a new book that just came out, The Free Time Formula, Finding Happiness, Focus, and Productivity no matter how busy you are. What a great subline, because I feel like everybody can say, no matter how productive they are, is they want more free time. And so I thought we would start there because you have a very particular viewpoint or opinion on how we utilize our free time. And you actually believe we all have free time, which is the first point that I think a lot of people would say, I have no free time. Prove it to me, Jeff.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't really have a strong opinion on free time until I began to think about that topic a lot for this book. And it really dawned on me early on in the process that I had this realization that all of our time is free time. Literally every minute of every day is up to us to decide what to do with it. And so that's not the traditional view of free time, meaning that you have like few hours after work on a Tuesday night to watch Netflix. But it is the perspective that all of the time that we have every single day is up to us to decide what to do with it. And I feel like once I made that mental shift, I began to look at my time very differently. I looked at my calendar, my task list, my projects I had committed to, all the meetings I had said yes to. And I was like kind of re-asking myself, is this what I want to do with my life? And I feel like that's such a more powerful question than how can I squeeze in 30 minutes of TV tonight? And I feel like that's what ends up happening with a lot of us because we're so busy. And I really wanted to really tackle free time from the perspective of, yes, we can acknowledge we're all busy. I am busy myself as well. But what if we rethought about free time from the perspective that we could redefine how all of our time is spent? And then if in that process you kind of carve out additional margin for yourself for rest and taking a break, that's awesome. But I think the bigger picture, the bigger lesson is, how could you just redefine your entire life and spend your time in a wiser way? Because once you do that, then all of a sudden your whole life has changed. I feel like that's the angle that I really want to go for.
Okay, I love that. Just that little change in your thought, going from victim to victor, meaning you're not a victim of the time. You're saying all time is free time. It's a choice. And when we have a choice and we're empowered with the idea of having a choice, that means that we get to make a different choice. And I love that.
Yeah, I think having the power is exactly it. Once you realize like it's in my hands, then you have the ability to change your life. And I just love that thought process.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Jeff, but when I'm working with clients and I talk to people, the language around time is I don't have enough time. There's never enough time. I have to go here. I have to do that. And it's a real victim mentality in that we feel like we're always at odds with time instead of being maybe friends with it or in alignment with time. And the perspective that you take on it is if all time is free time, then how am I going to choose to invest my time in that? And I really think that that's a powerful shift that anyone listening here can just take a pause and listen to that, is that you get to choose. In fact, I actually have a little story for that. I actually say productivity is a choice, and it's a choice we make every single day. And some of us more times than others, like every hour. And it was when my son came into my office and he was out of school for the day and he had his headphones on, he's on his iPad. And I was talking to somebody, he takes his earphones off and leans in and says, productivity is a choice. It's a choice you make every day. And then put his headphones back on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I must say that quite a bit. But there's so much truth to that. And when he said that, I was like, it's so empowering to say that we get to choose productivity for ourselves.
Oh, totally. I think that's exactly right. I remember this is probably a few months ago. I was at a party and saw a guy that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I asked him how he was doing. And he said, oh, busy, just kind of doing my thing. And I realized like the common answer that I hear is just that. Like busy is the first word people use to describe themselves, as opposed to my life is great or I'm having a lot of fun or anything else they could possibly say. What they choose to say is I'm busy. And that becomes just like this staple that we use to define our lives. And I feel like there's a problem there. Like somewhere in there is a change that needs to happen because busyness often does not equate to happiness or success. It just leads to stress and burnout. And I think that you're right that when we can choose how our time is spent, I think that default answer could easily change. If I see somebody, I haven't seen in a while, I'd love for them to say something different besides I'm busy. I feel like that's an opportunity to really kind of empower yourself with that ability.
Right. Okay. So I have a question for you because I have researching for this interview. I realized that you actually consider yourself a type A personality, like achiever. So I do the same way, right? Like I know I'm a type A. I love being busy, but not in a negative way. So how do we define our time when someone says, how is it going? I have been so conscious not to say busy, even though by choice, I live a pretty busy life, but it's kind of choices compounded on top of each other to try and get the most out of our days, our weeks, and enjoyment. It's kind of like, well, what do we say? I haven't quite figured out what the good language is for people to understand that we're choosing to invest our time in the things that matter most to us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly what I've been trying to get at myself in the sense of like to answer that question of how are you doing? I think that the way that I've kind of viewed it in the last few months, especially as I've thought about this book a lot, is that when someone were to say like kind of like, how are you doing or what are you up to or how is life for you? What I want to be able to say is I am devoting my life to something I really care about or a few things I really care about. And I'm making a lot of progress in those areas and I feel really good about it. And if I am busy, it's busy by choice. It's busy because I opted into doing lots of fun things that are moving the ball forward. And I feel like that's a very different mentality than life is beating me down and my task is so overwhelming because all these things are happening to me. I think that change to look at what I've done with my life, I'm opting into these things and creating success in a way that I chose because this is how I want to live. And that's not the same answer as life is just beating me up. That's what I'm trying to get to. And it's not always easy, but I know that when I think about kind of my best days or most productive days, I use the term rockin' productivity a lot of my podcast because what I'm thinking of is like those days when things are really going well. A lot of times I'm listening to really fun music. I'm doing a lot of activity that I'm smiling, I'm having fun, I'm energetic. And that it may look busy on the outside, but really what's happening to me is like, I'm just loving what I'm doing and I'm moving fast from one thing to the next because I'm in the moment. And that to me is like what a really great day can look like. And so if that means I'm busy, that's fine because it's the day I chose.
Yes, you chose the day. I love that. So take us back, Jeff, to about 6 years ago when it was before you're doing what you're doing now. What happened in your life that got you on the path of eventually, you're a keynote speaker on productivity. You have a top-rated multi-award podcast, 5 a.m. Miracle. You're doing so much in the productivity space, but it wasn't always like that for you, was it?
No, I think if you ask my parents as a kid, I was probably a really type A little kid who was getting a lot of stuff done. But as I grew into my teenage years, I really lost all of what I've had as like a 10-year-old. And I became very lazy and just kind of got out of bed at the last minute. And that kind of lazy mentality fed all the way up into my mid-20s. Not that I was actually a lazy person, but that I was always a last minute kind of guy.
Right.
And I would just kind of do things because like, oh, I have to do this now because it's 5 minutes until it's due. Okay, let's do it now. The college student mentality of I'm just going to roll out of bed before class and just show up.
Right.
Like that was kind of how my life became for a long time until I was working a job in my mid-20s and I was actually the registrar of a school, which the registrar title basically means like you're in charge of all the school's files, which is a lot of data, a lot of paperwork. It is an incredibly like daunting job if you're not a type A person. And even as a type A guy, I was like, wow, this is a lot of work. I need to figure out what is going on here. So I began to really practice productivity by default because I had to for my job. And then in the middle of all of that, I decided I was going to start a side business, which is now what I do full time. And so I was blogging and podcasting on the side. And then I decided I was going to run a marathon. And so I had this like incredible schedule every day where I was trying to figure out how to work that 9-to-5 job, how to build a side business, how to train for my marathon. And there was just so much happening. It was really testing my ability to say, how am I going to make all this fit in one single day? And the only answer I really had for myself was, well, if I get out of bed early, I can run for the day before work and then go to work. And then after work, do the side business. And so I had this like little puzzle piece of my schedule I put together. And the only way that it worked was if I got out of bed early. And that's where my 5 a.m. miracle kind of came into play was I began the practice of waking up early to do what I consider to be the most important kind of goal for the day. And so after that race was over, that specific marathon I was training for finished, I still wanted to wake up early and still wanted to use those early morning hours for something else that mattered to me. And so the actual goal shifted. It was a marathon at first, and then it was a business goal second, and then personal goal later on. And then over the years, it just became this habit of mine to say, I want to wake up and do the most important thing first. And that has basically become what the 5 a.m. miracle is. It's just this prioritization and mentality of putting your most important work up front in the day and being intentional with your time. And so that's really where the podcast came from, where the books came from, was this very simple act of saying, if I want the most important things to happen in my day, most likely those things are going to get done right away.
So you reverse engineered your schedule so that you could accomplish more, meaning all the things that mattered most to you, going to college and running your marathon and having a side business, which has done very well for you because you committed consistently over time. And your choice was to do it at 5 a.m., right?
Yeah, which is not a choice that I really wanted to opt into because I wasn't an early riser by choice. And I'm still not. It's still a choice every single day. If I want to wake up early, I have to still be intentional about it. But just the intentionality behind saying like, I want to wake up and do something I love or care about or that matters to me, that choice right there defined everything. I feel like that, if anything, was the big aha for me.
Okay, that's great. So let's fast forward and let's talk a little bit about your book. You have a theme going on with your book that references a lot of like working out and health. And one of them is called Flex Your Muscles and Fitness for Busy People and Mental Bicep Curls. And so how come you chose to run a theme of health and working out through a productivity and time book?
Well, I realized this is probably about the same time period I was doing that first marathon I was training for. I saw a direct correlation between my health and how much I was able to get done every day. By that, I actually mean like it wasn't just marathon running itself. It was the act of saying, if I really take care of myself, if my health is a priority, then by default, I have more energy, I'm more enthusiastic, I'm able to stay more motivated and productive throughout the entire workday. And so when I saw that correlation, it just kind of changed my entire life at that point because I realized that if I take care of myself, I will by default take care of my business goals and personal goals, and everything else will happen by default. But if I don't take care of myself, the opposite is also true, where those other things are harder to get done because I'm more tired, I get sick more often, like life is more difficult if I'm not in great shape and not really healthy. And so the theme of health kind of came into play in a stronger theme with this next book because my health really kind of hit a big wall last year. I had a major health crisis that really caused me to rethink my entire lifestyle and how I could build health back into my life as a priority to make sure that that does lead to more productivity down the road. And I've seen that over and over again, that the times that I take care of myself, I get more done. The times that I don't, the opposite is also true. In my own personal life, I'm always kind of rethinking, how do I get myself healthy again so that I can be my best self every day? And I feel like there's no better theme to have throughout my book besides that, because that is the one thing that for me is always true. And I think that for most people, that's also the same case.
Yes. For myself, I know that time management is the word that everybody knows and understands. But for me, I almost always feel that it's an energy management versus time management. That if I had energy for all of my waking hours and didn't need extra amount of sleep at 9, 10 hours because I was exhausted, that I really have enough time. And so like you, I've gone through my own journey of figuring out that my health is number one priority. And even though we know that like intellectually, we often have to be reminded. And sometimes it's with some scares. And I've had my own scares and I've been reminded that if you don't take a break, your body will break for you. Like it is so intelligent that if you ignore it, it's going to be like, it's not going to happen. I'm going to make you take a break, whether you take it or not. Have you found that this is a lesson that has to kind of be learned over and over again so that we're reminded how important it is to take care of our bodies?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I was on vacation last week, and in the middle of the trip, my wife and I went for a bike ride, just kind of like to tour the town we were in. And it was a great, fun little bike ride. And then the next day, I had massive lower back pain. And I realized, oh, wait, I haven't done anything remotely related to riding bikes. I'm not taking care of my back. Like I've been doing other things, but I forgot that one aspect. And so this back pain really kicked in a hardcore way. And as a reminder, like once again, like, yes, there are so many different facets of health that I have to take care of all of the big important ones, or my body is going to respond with, hey, that was a big mistake you just did. Like, don't do that again. So to that degree, yes, we have to relearn these lessons over and over again until we get to a point in our lives where we have enough of the habits built in to really take care of the big stuff. And now, of course, small things are going to happen throughout life, but there are some major lessons like stress management or just physicality, fitness management every day that we can do to prevent so many issues. And I feel like in my life, sometimes I have to learn those lessons a lot, and that's fine. But there has to be at some point a change that you make to acknowledge those and then do something about it. And so I'm still kind of, once again, relearning my own lessons here, but I feel like sometimes that's what it takes. I'm cool with that.
Yes. So I want our listeners to hear this for a moment. We've got two people that are obsessed about productivity. We make our living on it. We speak about it. This is what's really important to us, is to get the word out about productivity. And yet, if you listen to either one of our podcasts or these stories that we're sharing, is that we're both on our own journeys. And it's an inevitable journey that we're making the best choice. So like, what's the next right choice for us? And we have to be reminded that health is so important. And I never want our listeners to think, oh, we got it all figured out. Because I don't know about you, Jeff, but this is always a work in process to be our best selves and to be our most productive selves. Would you agree that you've had that experience over the years?
Well, that's kind of how my side business kind of started in the first place. I began blogging, and all of my blog posts in the beginning, I look back and read them sometimes, and they're terrible blog posts, but they're really funny to me because they were all like cathartic journal entries, basically. Like I was writing to the world about problems I was experiencing or things I had discovered, and they were all built like kind of based around this idea that I was experiencing issues on my own that I wanted to solve. And a lot of that solution came from me discussing these things publicly, but that helped me in my journey to improve and to explore new options and to find new ways of living. And that's what my entire kind of brand has been built on, is just my curiosity and desire to explore and to see what's possible. And of course, in the midst of all that experimentation, I make a ton of mistakes, and those are very public and very obvious. And so that's kind of the lifestyle I've chosen because I feel like that's what I need to be doing with my time. Like that really fits, but it also is this very public awareness that I am also a human being who makes tons of mistakes himself, and I am not trying to hide behind them or position myself as someone who's got it all together. I know that on my own podcast, I discuss this quite a bit, where I'll kind of take a break from the content and just kind of rehash, like, wait a minute, guys, I am a real person. I know I sound like this like professional podcaster, but in reality, I'm just a guy in his home office just talking on a mic. That's it. And I feel like that's an important thing to remember, that we are all in this fighting and figuring things out together. And I think it's a really cool thing.
Yes. Wow. I couldn't have said that best. I think that when other people aren't separate from us, so they're like, oh, they are like us, like they have the same challenges and look what they chose to do, that empowers the people that are listening to say, and I can too. You look back at 6 years ago, you probably weren't thinking you were going to grow up and have this huge business about productivity and become an expert. And yet you took something that you were curious about and you've created something that helps so many people. So I think that that's really, really inspiring. And thank you for that, Jeff.
Yeah, well, you're part of that story now too. And it's fun to see like all the different people that are providing their own voices into this. Because that's one thing for me that played a huge role, was just consuming a lot of content from a lot of different people, taking in lots of different personalities and opinions and thoughts. And that's kind of how I've become myself today, is I'm really the combination of lots of different people's opinions and books and podcasts. And I feel like that's, it's part of the journey, and it's a fun one.
It is. And I think that everybody listening is on their own journey too, because you're going to share what works for you, and you're going to share what works for you now. And in 6 months, that might be different. For me, I'm always telling everyone, like, you need to find what works for you, because what works for me and what works for Jeff might not work for you. So your goal is to find what works for you so that you can be your best self, so that you can be most productive. And in that journey is taking in different people's perspectives, or seeing how you or I see things that might be different from their past experiences. So it all adds up to helping people. And I think at the end of the day, Jeff, you and I have something very much in common. And that's that, this is an assumption, but you can let me know if I'm right, is that we choose productivity because we want to achieve our goals at a higher level. Like, we are doing this because it's a path to get us somewhere. For me, it's not like I'm super excited about productivity. I just know that when I am productive, I get to enjoy life more, I get to accomplish more, and things seem a lot easier.
Oh, totally. I mean, there's part of me that thinks I love like checklists and to-do lists, but in reality, like that's not what I'm actually in love with. I'm in love with the results that those things give me. And I feel like that's what productivity really speaks to. Actually, I was having a conversation with someone a few months ago about what productivity actually is, because I told this person, I was just me for the first time. I was like, I talk about productivity in my podcast. I have these books about being more productive. And they had this like sour look on their face, like, that's not for me. And I don't really care about that. And then I kind of asked them to dig in a little deeper, like, why is that kind of a buzzword for you? Why is productivity not something you look forward to? And I realized that they were associating productivity with something their boss told them to do something they didn't want to do. And I realized that they were associating the kind of being productive with just like work they don't like, and they have to do more of it. And I was thinking like, well, that's not it. Like, that's not at all how I view my own life or the work that I do. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. It's like, I'm looking forward to these checklists and these to-dos and these bigger projects because they serve a bigger purpose in my life. They help me achieve something I want, or become someone I want to become. I feel like that is the bigger lesson of productivity, is you have to look at it through the lens of what does it bring you? And if it brings you joy and success and opportunity, then you're doing it right. And if it brings you misery in your job, something's got to change. And I think that's kind of a big mindset shift around kind of what it means to be productive and how you view that in your daily life and work.
Yes, I think you said that so well, because I don't particularly wake up super excited about productivity. Now, I do because this has been my career and my job, but I do because of the bigger picture that you just illustrated, that you said that productivity is a way and a tool that we use to get us to where we want to go. So very, very well said. I am the same way. I don't know many people that actually wake up super excited about productivity. I think it's once that we have that shift that this is the way in which we get to do all those things that we enjoy and accomplish all the things that we enjoy, then we can get super excited about productivity.
Yeah, totally.
All right, I want to switch gears for a little bit and just talk about some of the things that you have in your book, because as I was reading your book, I was like, yes. And so I want to just highlight a few of those. And I think that anyone listening needs to go out and get the book, because we're only going to highlight some of the good stuff in here, but there's a lot of great, great content. But one of the things that you referenced was having margin in your calendar. Can you elaborate with, on that topic a little bit for us? And what does that mean for you to have margin in your calendar?
Well, actually, I was looking through my calendar just for this week coming up and realized that I had built in a lot more margin than I do in the past. I really like that. What margin kind of means for me is just big open space. In other words, I haven't overbooked myself. I've intentionally underscheduled my life. And that has become an important habit for me, because for a long time, I did kind of the opposite of that. I would ask myself, well, how much could I get done tomorrow? Let's fill the whole day with activity. But the problem with that is that backfires immediately, because most of us are bad at estimating time. We are bad at figuring out kind of how long things will take and how many interruptions we're going to have, how many distractions are going to show up. And so I realized that on an average day, I spend a lot of my time responding to emails and phone calls and tasks that just landed in my lap. There's a lot we don't see coming, and there has to be margin built in just to handle those things alone, not to mention just the downtime that we need to recover and replenish ourselves to get back into work again later. And so the way that I view my calendar is one of, I want to make sure the important things are on there. So the big stuff is there, but there's plenty of space around those big things to handle everything else, because so much else in life finds itself in those spaces between the big projects, or so many new things pop up that we don't see coming. There has to be intentionality built into your schedule to say, I know that life is going to be a little messy, so let me plan for that ahead of time and build in the margin that I need just for those things.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The reason I asked you that is because that's the very thing I'm working on right now myself. Intellectually, I know that, but my personality by default is like, okay, what is everything that I can get done? Can I literally maximize every single day of every hour? And then what happens is, like you said, life happens or kids get sick. I mean, one day I came in and my computer literally would not stay on. Like it started and stopped like 8 times. And by the time this was done, it was like an hour and a half later. If you don't have white space, then now that stresses you out so much more than if you have that built in, what I call white space or you're calling margin. You build that in and now there's some room to move it around. So like that day that this happened, I could move around what I had scheduled that morning to another space. But because I'm not really good at the white space, there was like no other space to move that task that I needed to be working on. And for me, because I run at such a high level and don't have hardly any white space on my calendar, I find it stressful when people are late to appointments or they cancel and they want to reschedule. And I don't particularly want to live like that. So I think white space is my friend and I need to really, really be focusing on that. Maybe you could be my accountability partner on that because I really need more white space.
Well, I think it's also kind of powerful once you do get to that point where you can schedule a lot more open time on your calendar, you see the benefits of that immediately. And then you want more of it because it's just so clear, so fast that, wait a minute, I can just kind of rearrange my calendar. I can find the time to handle those problems that pop up. Being in the work that I do, a lot of my time is spent fixing kind of technical problems in the website or customer service issues or all this little stuff that you can't see coming, that it shows up, it hits you in the face and you got to take care of it. And since so much of my life is devoted to that a lot of the time, there has to be space to deal with it. And then when those things show up and you have the time to handle it, it's not stressful anymore. It's not a problem. You handle the problem, you move on, and your day is flowing just as well as it would have beforehand. And so I feel like that's what you're looking for, is this kind of optimal rhythm of having the important stuff scheduled, but enough margin to handle everything else in a way that won't ever get you to the point where you are stressed out and overwhelmed.
Yes. So the way that I use white space is that it's not necessarily that nothing's getting done during that white space, but it's room to be moving around. Or if I get to an afternoon and I hadn't really scheduled anything particular, then I can go with how I feel. And I think that opens up a lot of room for creativity and movement in your business. Whereas where I tend to go is scheduling my entire week. I know that I enjoy it and I know that I like it when I have it, but every week, because I want to accomplish more or I want to hit these goals, I'm like, okay, so at 2:00, I'm going to do this. And at 3:30, I'm going to do this. And then I'm like, hold on. Let me just do some white space and see what I feel like doing at 2 or 3:30. How do you use your white space?
Well, I think it's exactly the same way. I love the focus on creativity because I feel like that's when I get the most creative and have the best ideas, is when I've given myself the space to think about problems or issues or bigger opportunities I want to take care of. And I feel like the white space, when it's there, I am so much more kind of nimble and agile and ready to jump on things and try new things. And that's where I see a lot of growth. That's where my business takes off. It's where I get new ideas. It's where I'll create new health plans. It's where all kinds of new fun stuff shows up for me, is when I have the ability to think. But if I've scheduled my day from the minute I wake up until all the time going to bed, and every single minute is called for, that doesn't leave any room for actual thought. I'm just like a robot going through the motions, which on some days can be effective if that's an ideal way to schedule a single day, but that's not a lifestyle. It's not the way I want to live every day. And so I want to make sure that I have the time set aside to be able to think and to be able to respond and do so with creativity and energy. And that only happens if there is white space on the calendar.
Okay, that's great. Do you tend to schedule your white space on particular days, late afternoons, mornings? Like, I know that we both talk about going with our energy flows and stuff. So when do you let white space happen into your schedule, or is it really just whenever it happens to happen?
Well, I think it really depends on kind of the white space is a response to the time that's not already scheduled for important things. So on the flip side, if I schedule the important things first, then the white space is the spaces around those important, kind of projects and meetings and goals. And so my objective with my weekly review is to sit down and ask myself, what are the important things I want to make sure get done this week? How can I guarantee time on my calendar for those things? And then that's the priority. And then space around that just happens to be what I end up with because I prioritize the important things first.
All right. That sounds amazing. I just have this question because I'm curious as well. So you talk about theme days in your book, and I utilize theme days as well. In fact, I've used theme days before I even knew they were theme days. I didn't know that that was like a common productivity strategy. So what kind of theme days would we see if we looked at your schedule?
I like to use theme days for podcasting. So whether I'm like producing a show, so Mondays for me tend to be podcast days. So that's a lot of show notes, recording, interviews. Mondays tend to be a go-to day for that. I have a day devoted to my academy. So I have a kind of a productivity academy where I have members who watch a lot of videos I produce. So a lot of times I'll have at least one day a week devoted to recording videos, doing post-production on those, scheduling content, all that kind of stuff. I tend to have at least one day a week in the calendar just for personal time. So that's kind of me, my wife, we kind of go out, have date night. We'll do kind of have our time together, at least one day a week for that. I have some days, usually once a week, that's just a personal health day. So that literally is just like, I'm going to go for a long run at the park. I'm going to take care of myself today. I'm going to have a day where there's no work on the calendar, just like completely take a huge break. I'm really bad about that. That's the one theme day I need to get more of. But when I do, those are really powerful. So I want to make sure I have more of those as well. I usually have a day devoted to other projects, so kind of like fun stuff. So I like to set aside usually Fridays for this, where I have one day just to kind of catch up on things that I usually would not make time for. So it's like a random day, basically. It's like all these little things I've not prioritized, but I do want to do at some point. And I like to do all those in one single day. That way, there's a limit. I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but I have some space available to do all the randomness of life. Those are kind of the big things right there, I'd say.
Okay, that's excellent. So I do theme days as well. And I've been in business going on 6 years myself. And I can count on one hand how many client appointments I've taken on a Friday. From day one, the way that I had set it up was that because I want to run at such a fast pace during the week, I knew I needed one day to review my day, do my weekly review. We both do that. I do a power hour that day. So my power hour is all the things that could possibly have fallen through the cracks and emails and maybe things that I promised somebody, that all kind of gets done in that power hour time. But letting myself have that Friday after the week, after the first 4 days, and having Friday as my catch-up day, I think I can contribute a ton of my success to that. And then being so consistent with having that, because I feel like so many people let every week run, like bleed into the next week and bleed into the next week. And I knew I wanted to end my week without taking my stuff into my weekend. And for me, having that theme day of just administrative catch-up, planning, strategy, all happens on Fridays.
Yeah, that's a great plan. I've used the same idea myself as well. I know that when I have those little things like you mentioned, the admin stuff taken care of, it's incredible how that leads into a weekend where you can step away from work and feel good about it.
Yeah. And so then also you'll find on a Friday is any mastermind group. So I belong to a couple mastermind groups, or I'll take an afternoon off and do something for myself. So like get a massage. So it's kind of like the reward. Like I like to wind down my day. But I think the trick to theme days is, and anyone listening, it's not really a secret anymore, is that if you were to ask to meet with me and I had Friday wide open, even though it's already scheduled out for all the things that I do on my Friday, I am not available. Like I simply am not available to take on appointments. And I don't tell just the normal person that. My clients all end up knowing I never take client appointments. But it's those things in which you don't need to feel like you have to explain like, oh, well, I'm actually taking Fridays off, or I don't take appointments on Friday. I just say, well, I can meet you next week on Tuesday or Thursday. Does that work for you? That allows us to have that consistency and hold those days sacred with theme days, I think.
Yeah, one thing that I realized with that same mentality of saying like days I'm available was when I switched to having an online calendar system. So I use Acuity scheduling for mine, where I would take this company that says like, hey, you can predefine the hours you're available and then send somebody a link and they can just schedule time that fits with your schedule. And I've gone through that process for the last few years, going from book a time whenever you want on my calendar down to you could book a time for 1 hour on one day a week and that's it. And it went from this kind of openness of fill my time with however you want to wait a minute, I can't let other people just kind of fill my calendar. I will give them very specific time slots to work with. And then I know when those interviews will happen, those meetings will take place. And I know that outside of that, it's my time to do with what I want. And so to that degree, it's allowed me to take a lot more control over my time and be much more intentional about when I say yes to things and when I don't. And I feel like that was a huge switch for me to be able to take that kind of control of my calendar and really dictate when certain things happen and when they don't.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad that you did that. I do that as well. And I actually am chuckling to myself because my Mondays is my project/podcasting days. And you had said Mondays were yours. And I'm like, what would have happened if Mondays were not yours or were not mine? And you had two productivity people trying to schedule a podcast interview. So all I can say is good thing we both have Mondays as our podcast days.
Well, to that degree, I will say I make exceptions to it when I think it's worth it. And so to that, like sometimes I'll have somebody who says like, hey, I can only meet you on Tuesday morning. Maybe that's a bad time for me, but if the person is really awesome, or if it's an opportunity for me that's going to move my business forward, I will make exceptions. But generally what I would do first off is say, Tuesday's not the best for me. Let's shoot for another day that does work. I would only revert back to making an exception if I had no other option. But the default answer, the initial response is, let's see if we can get somebody on the calendar in an ideal place. And if that's not possible, we'll consider other options. But making your default answer to say, here's when I'm available, that works the vast majority of the time. And so most people will end up choosing a time on your calendar when you gave them the chance to do so. That for me was a big switch.
I hope that everybody just heard what you said, because I feel like when we create block schedules or theme days or any kind of rituals to our schedule, that the big excuse on why it doesn't work is because, sometimes I have to take a meeting on that day, or well, I can't do that because I have a client that wants to meet me on Friday. So what you said essentially is that we are focusing on the rules, not the exceptions. That of course we all have exceptions, but because the exceptions are far and few between, it allows us to be most productive on most days on our routines and schedules. And so I also have exceptions. Okay. So Fridays, I'm a little less open to Friday morning specifically. I'm a little less open to an appointment on that time. But if somebody wants to do a podcast interview, of course, I've done those through the week. And of course, I'll do it if it's somebody I've reached out to that I really want to get on my podcast. But what happens with the theme days, and you actually reference this in your book very, very well, was that it reduces the friction. So when we're in our mindset and we're in our flow of podcasting, when I'm done with this, I'm going to be, for example, this interview, when you and I are done, Jeff, I'm going into recording videos. I'm in my creative recording zone. But on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, those are my client days. So I'd be going from the energy of investing in my clients, coaching them, doing that type of thing, and then having to jump into the creative interview. That flow isn't always that easy. And that's another reason why I don't really like to break up my days or weeks off of theme days.
That's a really good point, and one that I have seen firsthand is that the days when I have a lot of kind of what I call like random things on the calendar, like things that don't jive well together, it is really difficult to switch your mindset around those things. Like to your point, if you're going to coach a client and then record a video and then record a podcast, but then write a book all in the same day, your brain can't handle that many switches and do a really great job at each one of them. But it's so much easier to do a great job if, like when I wrote this book, I was devoted to writing the book, and that was it. So for about 2 months solid, all I did was write all day, every day until it was finished. And that was, not only did I get it done faster because of that, but the quality bar was so much higher because I was just focused on one activity and doing my very best at that one thing. But if I had tried to mix that in with the rest of my life and kind of bounce back and forth and try lots of different activities every day, the book would have been terrible. Like there's no way it would have been any good because I would never have been able to get myself into a good mindset and a good rhythm with something and stick with it. So I think to that degree, theme days give you such a chance to do so on a daily basis and say like, just today, all I'm going to do is this one type of activity. And if I stick to that, I already know I'm going to get more done today and the quality bar is going to go up. And I feel like that's a really big breakthrough right there.
Congratulations on being able to pull out 2 months of focused work on this book. That is a huge productivity accomplishment as it is, because there's so many of us that say, I have a book in me. Someday I'm going to write a book. And the issue is that we write a few sentences, or they start and stop and then put in a bunch of other projects. And so what you just said was you laser focused for 2 months on one big goal. And that's where all your time, energy, and focus went. And as a result, you've got this book in the world that is going to be helping people.
Yeah, it was amazing to me how effective it was, because this is the third book I've actually written. The first book I wrote never got published. The second one I wrote in a similar fashion, but not quite as efficiently. And so this one was my chance to really kind of test my own abilities at focus to figure out, if I just kind of go to the library, spend 4 to 6-ish hours per day doing nothing but writing, will that give me the end result that I want? And I saw immediately that was the best answer. And so I just went back day after day, going to the library, writing until my brain hurt, and then stopping. And it was just so effective because I gave myself the chance to kind of get the best out of my head every day before I was too tired to continue working. And that allowed me every day to make tremendous progress. And then, of course, get the book done a lot faster than the average author finishes a book, because I really committed the time to doing it. And I knew that if I tried to make it stretched out over a long period of time, that I would be rushing at the end, that I would, be sloppily doing my work, and the creative rhythm and flow would never have the chance to really do its job. I feel like that's what I'm trying to get to on the important work that I do, is get to that point where I can really get into something deeply, which only happens if you have a large amount of committed time to doing so.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jeff. This has been amazing information and insight into your days and how you actually walk the talk. So you wrote the book. It wasn't just theory or strategy. You have shared with us firsthand and how these principles have actually helped you in your life and helped you achieve, whether it's physical and running marathons or it's writing a book in 2 months. Now, I happen to know your personality type because I'm very much like that. So I'm guessing your goal next time is going to be in 6 weeks, but we'll see about that. I don't know. That's pretty crazy to write. And this is like a big thought out book. So in 2 months, great accomplishment. Thank you so much for being here. How do we find the book? So mine got shipped to me. So thank you, Jeff, for letting me read the book before our interview. But for our listeners that are like, how do I get my hands on this book? Where do they go?
Well, of course, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can go to my website as well, jeffsanders.com. I've got links to the book right there as well. It's available on Kindle now, Google Play, so lots of different options for it. The audiobook version's coming out in a few months, so that'll be on Audible at that point. But for now, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, best to go right there.
Awesome. So the Free Time Formula by Jeff Sanders. Jeff, how do we find you? Where can we go find your podcast? Is that on your website as well? And we'll link out to all of this in the show notes.
Yeah, you can go to jeffsanders.com for all of that, or write to the podcast on iTunes if you want to. It's just the 5 a.m. Miracle with Jeff Sanders. It's all right there.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. And I hope you have a productive day.
Thank you.
I have loved having you listen to Productivity Straight Talk, but I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So based on what you learned, what will you take action on today? Jeff shared some extremely great nuggets and wisdoms and insights about the free time formula. What really resonated with you? Was it theming your days? Or perhaps it's about having a margin in your schedule, white space. Whatever it was that you picked up from our conversation that made you think, aha, or wow, that would be really, really good if I can execute on that, implement on that, take action on that. What was that for you? Now, I don't want to spoil it with what it was for me, because it really is a different experience depending on where you're at and what you heard from today's episode. But what I am confident about is that there's something that made you think. And I don't want that to be lost. I don't want you to go on to the next podcast and the next event, or park your car or stop your run or your exercise and not have already identified what action you are going to take right now based on this episode. So I will leave you with, what action will you take today based on the information you heard in today's episode? Hey, Productivity Straight Talk listeners, I want to make sure that you're not missing out. Yes, you. If you're listening to my voice right now, I'm talking to you. Are you listening to Productivity Straight Talk from the sidelines? Not yet a Productivity Straight Talk insider? That's okay, but what it does mean is that you're losing out on valuable information and resources you can't get anywhere else to improve your productivity and maximize your profit. If you want to step up to the plate and get in the game, head on over to productivitycommunity.com to join the free Productivity Straight Talk community and start receiving exclusive content. And lastly, I want to thank you so much for leaving great reviews and sharing Productivity Straight Talk with other entrepreneurs. You're not just sharing information, you're giving the gift of improved productivity and maximized profits. I have a special thank you to Warren Ray, who recently said, "Amazed at the practical and useful information I was able to pull from just a few episodes. Subscribed right away." Thank you, Warren. So that's my straight talk for you today. And until next time, have a productive week.